Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
In Sacramento, Controller John Chung says lawmakers' paychecks are not in the mail, and the wait for a balanced budget continues. A troubling number of California schools face insolvency. Could new proposals stabilize state funding for education? A shakeup at Muni leaves the Bay Area's largest transit agency poised for big changes. And the effect of global warming on our treasured national parks. Coming up next. And good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Schaefer, sitting in tonight for Belva Davis. Welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me on our news panel tonight are Rachel Gordon, City Hall reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, Anna Tintakoulis, education reporter for the California Report on KQED Public Radio, and Wyatt Buchanan, Sacramento Bureau reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. Wyatt, let's begin with you. It's been a few days now since state legislators found out that they weren't going to get paid until they passed a balanced budget. How do they like working for free?
They don't. Nobody is happy about this decision, but the reactions came in different ways from different folks. Mostly Democrats came out and criticized it. Republicans stayed either quiet or said, you know, okay, we're okay with this decision. We need a budget. There were a few Democrats who said that too, but there was some real fiery language from some Democrats.
Now, of course, the state controller is a Democrat, and just as they were unhappy with Jerry Brown's veto, they're also unhappy with the controller's decision. What did John Chung say was the reason for withholding their pay?
So what he did is he took a look at the budget as it was passed, added up what they said, you know, was to be spent by the state, added up what the revenues were, and said these don't match. The biggest, it was about 1.85 billion was the difference. Most of that was education funding. But he really stepped into a pretty messy process. The budget isn't a clean process where things just, you go from one to another. There's a lot of moving parts all the time every year. But now the controller has stepped in and basically said, you're going to have this done in a really sort of tight way by the deadline.
So why isn't this exactly what California voters wanted, though? They said we are tired of having the budget process drawn out for months sometimes after the deadline to get this done. You've got to start figuring out how you can get a balanced budget together. And it sounds like they might be trying to figure it out at this point, right? Or people dug in and say, we're just going to eat tuna fish from here on out.
They're working on an alternative, and I think we're likely to see something next week.
I mean, is this working, this withholding the pay? They working extra hard now?
It's only been a few days, but I think there definitely is. It's a brand new element that we've never seen before up there. You know, it could go on and on like it has in past years. Last year was the latest in state history, and it's just sort of like, well, this is what happens. But now everybody's talking about the paychecks.
And John, we should just say, Wyatt, we should say that this didn't just come out of the blue. That this is because of Prop 25, which the voters passed in November, but there was some interpretation here by the controller, right? It wasn't, or was it? Was it a black and white issue? There's no budget, therefore you don't get paid.
Well, yeah, the controller, which has never done before, took a look at the budget and did this calculation, and there are actually two propositions that are in play here. There's another Prop 58 passed in 2004 that mandates a balanced budget. So he said these two propositions are in the same section of the state law. I have to look at both of these. One is it on time? Two, is it balanced? And he said no.
Wyatt, how are people viewing Chang? I mean, is he scoring political points? How are lawmakers viewing him in Sacramento?
Well, it's interesting, and like you said, Scott, he's a Democrat, and he did this to the majority Democratic Party, just less than a week after the Democratic governor vetoed the budget. So I think some people are pretty upset that they think he made a political move here because the legislature is wildly unpopular. And you make a move like this, people just love it. The voters, I think they see, they passed this proposition. It's actually doing what we intended it to do, and which is not always the case with propositions.
So can you go back and tell us what the sticking points are? You said it's over education, but who has to give, and what are they going to give up? What are they looking for? What did Governor Brown say? This is how we have to move to move forward for California's budget.
Well, this is all happening behind closed doors right now.
Is it still the tax measures that are out there?
There's sort of a parallel track. There's two things happening. The governor is still publicly saying, I want this tax measure to go on the ballot, to get 4 Republican votes to do it.
And that's to extend taxes that we already have here, right?
Right, that expire next Friday.
Well, and what about that? Because, Jerry Brown had been saying all along, we want to just extend these taxes, but if they expire, and they expire July 1st, right, next week, so then it becomes a tax increase. So does that really change the politics of it if it does go to the ballot?
I think it does, and political consultants say absolutely it does, because you're not, and polling has shown that the numbers are higher for an extension of current rates, but when you say an increase, that's real money. Right now, you'd be paying about the same that you were, last year. But if that goes away, some estimates it's about $1,000 for a family of 4 is what it would amount to, and people will have to decide, well, do I want to spend more now?
I was wondering, do you think the governor, in a sense, has kind of painted himself in the corner here at this point? With his plan B, what would the plan B be?
Well, and he never had a plan B, and he was proud of that. And I think we're seeing some things develop behind the scenes now, alternatives. But the governor made a series of promises in the campaign, and he's been pretty adamant that he's going to stick to them. And he himself is in a really unusual position as a politician. His age, his experience, his lack of ambition for, higher office, so he can really stick to that. And, I think the veto was really, a bit of an earthquake.
Political earthquake.
And he was, it seems that he went into office just with that message to folks, that he has nothing to lose. He's not looking forward to the next thing. So it is what the voters demanded on this budget first time. But we'll see what happens if they actually make cuts, right? Is that what the voters want?
Well, and of course, those cuts, if they come, are going to be, education is going to be taking a big hit. And Anna, one of the things that's been kicked around this week up in Sacramento is a new kind of tax that would help fund education. Tell us about that, and what are the politics behind that?
Right. Well, the big movement right now is to take a look at what's lying beneath California's soil. So it's crude oil, right? There's this tax to basically tax companies to extract the oil in California, and this would put a 15% tax on companies, which would generate about $3 billion for public schools, community colleges, and public universities. This is not a new idea. We've seen these type of oil taxes in the past in California. There's a long history, but this is the first time it's tied to education. And polling shows a lot of people would rather protect education than see cuts elsewhere. So I think supporters are thinking they have a good chance.
Well, like you said, I think it was 2006, Prop 87 was on the ballot, which would have done exactly this, although the money would have gone into the general fund, not into education. And I think there was $150 million spent on that campaign on both sides combined.
Right.
So who's behind this, and does he have deep pockets?
Well, I guess not surprisingly enough, it's a community college professor. He's in Long Beach. His name's Peter Matthews. He's leading the fight. He's run for Congress before, I think, so he's definitely a political type. And he's the man, the face behind this, but he has such a small little budget that he's working with. I think so far they've raised $7,000 to start just buying the petitions, the actual papers, to start disseminating them. And they're really relying on school communities, students who are fed up, unions, faculty unions, teacher unions. And he's saying, we're relying on these grassroots volunteers until we get enough money, hopefully at least $1 million by July, to hire paid professional signature gatherers.
Is this simply a new tax on existing oil that's being extracted from the ground, or are they kind of saying, let's do this and let's open up California much more to the oil companies to take out a lot more oil and get the money that way? Is it just what we're tapping into already?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of experts say this is a natural resource. It's in our ground. It's not moving anywhere. It has a limited lifespan to it. We need to tax it. This oil doesn't belong to the companies. It belongs to the people of California. And there's a lot of other taxes around oil companies. There's a fact that's thrown out there that California is the only oil-producing state that doesn't tax for extraction of oil, but there's other kinds of taxes. And the oil industry has been successful in convincing voters that, if you tax us this extraction, that it will pass on to consumers.
Yeah.
You'll pay more at the pump, and they've been successful at getting that argument through.
Well, I think the oil companies might disagree that the oil belongs to the people. I mean, they pay for the leases and so on. But what about that argument, though, that ultimately this is just going to get passed on to the voters? I mean, right now gas prices are so high. It seems like that would be an easy campaign to run, just to say you want to pay more money still for gasoline.
Right. Well, the drafters of these type of initiatives have tried to build this mechanism where you can't pass it on to consumers. And so there's a lot of back and forth and legal maneuvering and conversations about, can you legally pass this on to consumers? But the folks with this particular initiative is saying we have this safeguard, you can't pass it through, and this just makes absolute sense. Like it's almost crazy that California doesn't have this tax on the books, whereas Alaska and Texas, those type of states do.
And where is the teachers unions on this? CTA, these groups are some of the largest players in Sacramento, have some of the deepest pockets in the state, and can get things passed. They haven't jumped on this yet?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big flaws with this particular proposal and ballot initiative process is that they have a lot of smaller unions that are latching onto this, namely community college professors and student groups, but you don't see the large powerful teachers unions globbing onto that. So you lose some political muscle in their argument for it. So that's to be seen. I think they're trying hard. In fact, Peter Matthews, the man at the center of this initiative, is in the Bay Area, and he'll be at the Pride Parade trying to get signatures. So he's running up and down the street to try to get more support.
All right. Well, of course, the schools come into contact with a lot of people, and so does the Muni, the Metropolitan Transit Association, the MTA, and there's some big shakeups going on over the last week. Rachel,
right,
tell us what's
there
going on.
There are big ones. So the Municipal Transportation Agency carries has 700,000 boardings a day. As you said, it's the largest public transit agency in the Bay Area, 7th largest in the country. And it's an agency that doesn't just run the Muni transit system. It also runs taxi programs, bike, pedestrian, parking and traffic. Anyone who's had their car towed or gotten parking tickets, about this agency. And there are big changes that happened. Nathaniel Ford, who's run the agency for 5.5 years now, has been very gently shown the door. By mutual agreement, his contract was terminated early, 2.5 years early. He got a $384,000 severance package. Most of the money he would have gotten anyway if he left early. And that raises the opportunity for the agency to bring in new leadership, new blood in there to kind of change things. And you have to ask, well, why would they want to? Muni it's an agency that you both love and you hate. You love it because you really don't have to walk more than 4 blocks to catch a bus or a cable car or a streetcar. That's generally how it is. You come from a town like Fresno or Los Angeles or St. Louis, or you can name it, and you go like, what are you guys complaining about? This is a great transit system here. If you rely on it every day, it's hard to rely on. And it has a pretty dismal on-time performance rate that voters said we want an 85% on-time performance. It's never gotten past 75%. So that's one of the big things with it.
So Ed Lee, kind of a quiet guy, hasn't talked about Muni very much. What role is he playing here, if any,
right,
in easing out Nathaniel Ford and maybe steering this agency towards someone else who he likes?
Right. So Ed Lee's the mayor. He's only supposed to be here for a year in San Francisco as the interim mayor after Gavin Newsom left to become lieutenant governor. Whether he decides to run or not in the November election is still up in the air, though he insists he isn't. He played a quiet behind-the-scenes role in this. It really is up to this independent board to choose who's going to run Muni, who isn't going to run, if someone's going to be out or not. But Ed Lee said he was very clear. He wanted someone who's 150%, is his phrase, committed to running this very important agency. Because even if you don't take the buses, you want people to be on buses so there aren't going to be traffic jams. A lot of people care about it. He's a guy, he's not saying this is who I definitely want. In fact, the choice is in the mayor's, but someone he's saying I certainly could live with, and I've hired him before, is a man named Ed Riskin, who runs the Department of Public Works in San Francisco. He hasn't had transportation experience, but he has a lot of political support at City Hall. He has support from the activists. He's a big transit-first advocate in the city. So he's a front runner, but there are a number of people on the executive team at the agency that are also angling for this job, and it really remains to be seen who might get it.
So are they looking in San Francisco? I know Nat Ford came from Atlanta, right? Is this time around, are they saying we want somebody who's
The
been
chairman
around?
of the board of directors is saying he'd like someone close to home, someone who could hit the ground running. That kind of gives Ed Riskin, the DPW, a head start. And this is all happening as well when the operators union, about 2,200 Muni operators, just got a new contract imposed on them. It was a very contentious contract battle there. What this new contract does, which was something that voters wanted, is to give management a lot more power over work rules, over discipline, over scheduling. You go, well, how come management didn't have those powers before? And it's been about 4 decades, really, that the operators have had a lot of say of how the agencies
So
run.
is this an agency that is doing well, and the next director is going to just build on the progress that's been made by the exiting executive director, or what? Where's it at?
It's an agency that's really struggling, I think. The transit agency in San Francisco, like the transit agencies not only across California but across the country, have been slammed by the bad economy. The state of California has taken a lot of money away from transit to help balance the budget we're trying to see. In San Francisco, other city departments have been tapping into Muni's money as well, which they've been able to do with some fancy bookkeeping there. So in that sense, it's been difficult. They have a lot of plans in place that can make this agency kind of balloon, and in fact, it's being internationally watched actually, on a new parking management program that they have called SF Park, which uses demand-based pricing, and it's supposed to ease congestion in the city. We also have something called the Transit Effectiveness Project in the city, which is supposed to remake all of Muni's routes and make it run more efficiently. They just haven't been able to get. The SF Park is on its way to going through, but the Transit Effectiveness Project's on hold because of lack of funding.
And just quickly, Rachel, what qualities do you think are needed in the next successful Muni director?
Someone with thick skin, someone who's very politically adept because it's an extremely scrutinized agency, someone who can juggle a lot of balls, because you're not just running the buses, you're running the whole transportation scene in San Francisco.
All right, Rachel, thanks very much. I'm sure we'll be following this story in the coming weeks and months to come. Well, as the effects of global warming upset our weather patterns, the results are affecting the landscape, plants, and animals of our national parks, including many right here in California. What, if anything, can be done by the National Park Service to mitigate the effects of climate change? Climate Watch senior editor Craig Miller sat down with National Parks Director John Jarvis to find out.
John Jarvis, thanks for taking some time with us.
Thank you. It's great to be
You and
here.
I first met last fall up in Glacier National Park. You were talking to a group of reporters on a creek, and you said the greatest threat to the integrity of the national park system that you've ever faced is climate change. That's a huge statement.
Yeah, well, I believe every bit of it. And Glacier National Park is the perfect place to do that, besides being a beautiful place. Glacier is sort of the poster child for climate change. Based on all the predictive models we see, within a couple of decades, the glaciers that define Glacier National Park will literally be gone. And glaciers store water. They provide a refrigerator service basically for free for streams that support wild trout and other species, and all of that is going to change. So the basic integrity for our national parks is being challenged by climate change.
California has a huge stake in this. I think I counted more than 20 parks, monuments.
25.
25, yeah, you know the exact number. Joshua trees, according to a recent report from the U.S. Geological Survey, likely to disappear from 90% of their current range by the end of the century. I think that includes Joshua Tree National Park.
Right.
You can't just pick up a park and move it, right? So
nor will Joshua trees migrate on their own either. So we are deeply concerned about, the purposes for which the national parks were established were to preserve a piece of natural wildness. And our mantra, our core values, has been about preserving these places unimpaired for future generations. And yet now we are actually seeing impairment to these basic components of the system driven by climate change.
So how do you attack a challenge like that? What's the counteroffensive to something that you basically can't change?
Well, I think the National Parks Service has a unique role in climate change, and I can kind of click them off. One is basic science. We are perfect laboratories to really understand climate change and its effects and its rate, because these are the few places that have been set aside and are at least relatively natural in their current state. The second piece is we're an opportunity for education to actually show the American public the effects of climate change that we're literally seeing on the ground right now. A great thing about parks is our visitors are repeat visitors. So, if you go visit your cousins and you'll see their kids, go over like 10 years, every time you see them they get another foot taller or whatever. People come back to national parks repeated, and we can actually see the change within their visit framework.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
too.
So that's a perfect opportunity for education. The third piece is really mitigation. The National Park Service itself can reduce its own carbon footprint and at the same time demonstrate that to the American public.
Although it's hard to imagine the parks have a huge carbon footprint,
We don't.
It's a very small part of the problem.
We don't, but we can be an exemplar. We can demonstrate how to reduce carbon footprint.
So what are you seeing on the ground right now, and what are you doing about it?
Well, for instance, in the Sierras, we're seeing a lengthening of the fire seasons. I mean, they start earlier and they burn later, and they also burn more intensely. And when you get fire burning with higher intensity, you begin to change the ecology, and as a result, some new species come in. Buffelgrass in the Southwest is an example of an invasive species. It's flashy, and it can cause increased frequency of fires, which result in, death of Joshua trees or other species.
And this isn't a blip. You think this is a symptom of systemic, ongoing climate change?
Absolutely. I mean, we can correlate the changes, like, for instance, in the Cascades, in Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Olympic, those kinds of the northern tier, we've seen a very well-documented shift in rain on snow, which would typically happen in the spring. Historically, it's just been a positive trend. You have these big snowpacks, it rains in the spring. The snow is so big, it's like a big sponge. It just sort of soaks up all that rain and then lets it out through the spring, which is essential to, not only the environment, but agriculture communities down below, potable water systems. That rain is now happening in the fall instead of the spring. Very documented, scientifically based shift. And the result is there's no snowpack, so it's just heavy rains, and it's washing out systems, washing out millions of dollars of infrastructure, road systems, all of that. So we're really beginning in our planning process to plan for climate change, plan for sea level rise, where we locate facilities, what kind of facilities we put in as we replace those that are lost as a result of this kind of damage, is all part of our planning agenda for parks.
You mentioned money. This is not going to be cheap to try to do this kind of adaptation and mitigation. Here in California, we hear biologists using the term species triage, trying to actually pick winners and losers, which ones we're going to save. We're starting to do that with parks here in California. Can you foresee a day when we may have to face that with national parks as well?
Well, I think the key, one of the keys to the concerns about climate change at the landscape scale is connectivity. We need to look at the landscape slightly differently than we have. We've always partitioned our landscape and say, this is private, this is agriculture, this is protected. But now we need to be thinking about how they integrate. That if species are going to move, and they are moving now, right. They need corridors, they need paths in order to get from this place to this place. Now, ultimately, we may have to get to what's called assisted migration. If there's a species, let's say it's a pica, which is a wonderful little Whistle
Rabbit
Pig.
relative, right.
Whistle
Looks-
Pig.
Looks like a cartoon Tom and Jerry character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're fantastic little creatures that live in the Sierras. They are literally moving up. You know, we have that well documented that climate change is driving them higher and higher in the mountain. Well, ultimately you get to the top, you don't have any place to go.
Right.
But mountains in the north may be able to support those populations. And so we really have to work with academia, with all the land management agencies, Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, state parks, and all of that to look at how we can build in resilience and redundancy in these natural systems so that they can make it into the future.
It's a huge challenge. I want to let you get back to it. Thanks for taking a few minutes out for us.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great.
Wow, sounds like they really have their work cut out for them. Thanks for coming in today, Rachel, Wyatt, Anna. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend. All right. And thanks to all of you for joining us as well. Don't forget, you can visit kqed.org/thisweek to catch up on episodes and segments. And one program note, we'll be off next week for the July 4th holiday. But you can join me back here on Friday, July 8th for the television special Republic of Cannabis, part of our in-depth look at California's booming medical marijuana industry. And for more about the series, check out kqednews.org. I'm Scott Schaefer, sitting in for Belva Davis. Good night.
Funding for Climate Watch on This Week in Northern California is provided by the Mary Van Voorhees Fund and the Fallis Family Fund.